Exxon, Chevron, Occidental joining the oil and gas climate initiative. American companies have not participated in this before. What does it mean? Realistically, what does it mean for these companies to join, and what can you accomplish?
We are glad that Chevron, Exxon, and Occidental can join the oil and gas climate initiative. You know, this is we started this initiative in 2014. Saudi Aramco is a founding member of this initiative. We will have more weight on the industry with 3 big companies from the US joining. It used to be mainly Europe, Latin America, and Asia with CNBC or with us. Now we have North America joining, 3 major companies from North America joining. This is great because it adds more weight as an industry. It will be 30% of the oil and gas production with these 3 companies.
You understand there is a natural cynicism, though, among people. They say, well, oil and gas companies joining a climate initiative, what can they realistically do to slow down climate change?
Well, I think there's a lot that can be done. I think some of it will be announced tomorrow with regard to the methane targets. The baseline for 2017 was 0.32. We're showing a target of 0.25 by 2025 with an ambition to go to 0.2. That's a significant reduction, almost 1/3 reduction in methane emission. There is a lot of work through the Climate Investment Fund, which is almost $1 billion, each company contributing $100 million now with the 3 companies joining in. That fund will increase to $1.3 billion. There's a lot of technologies in terms of reducing methane initiatives, in terms of capturing CO2 through carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration, turning CO2 to useful products, or reducing methane emissions through better valves investments. A lot of initiatives that's being done by OGCI partners to reduce carbon emissions globally.
We have spoken. You believe that oil and gas will remain a very important fossil fuel for the next decades, if not a half century or century. But at the same time, your country's sovereign wealth fund invested $1 billion into an electric car company. How do you square those two? Can they go together?
Oh, yes. I think it's a testament that we need all energy sources. We have always said that you need electric vehicles, you need renewables to be part of the energy mix. They are making a significant growth recently. However, they are starting from a small base. Oil and gas in particular, they will play a vital role of the energy mix over the long term. They will continue to do that. Look at this year, for example. 1.5 million barrels of additional demand. Over the last 3 years, almost 1.5 also. If you talk about next year, both IEA and EIA are talking about 1.5 million barrels of additional demand. Add to that natural decline. Each year you need to add almost 5 million barrels to meet additional demand and offset the natural decline. The growth that we are seeing, even though it's significant and it is very well encouraged and it is in the right direction in electric vehicles and renewables, but it starts from a small base. Electric vehicles, for example, 1.2 million electric vehicles were added in 2017. 2 million went to 3.2 million. However, the total number of vehicles entered the market, 95 million vehicles. In terms of how much they offset of production, 30,000 barrels. So in a demand of additional demand of 1.5 million and a natural decline of 3 to 3.5, 30,000 out of 5 million barrels is, even though, as I say, the number is significant in terms of addition, more than 50%, 2 million to 3.2 million. However, you still need much more to offset the demand growth.
The word offset is a nice segue. We are about ready to see maybe 1 million or 2 million Iranian barrels be taken off the market. How many barrels do you think will come off the market from Iran, or have already? And how much power does Aramco have to offset that decline?
Well, we have always said to all of our customers globally that we are ready to supply whatever they require in terms of additional barrels, and to make sure that the market is balanced and there is no shortfall. Saudi Aramco has a maximum sustained capacity of 12 million barrels per day. And we still have almost 1.5 million barrels of spare capacity today that is available if required to offset any shortfall in the market.
Are you at 10.5 now?
Almost. When we talk about barrels, we need to distinguish that from what the ministry announced, because our barrels include condensates and include Abu Safa, which is shared with Bahrain. So we have different number than what when we talk about. So almost 10.5 to 10.7 million barrels we're talking about at Saudi Aramco.
I know that your energy minister, Khalid Al-Falih, is representing OPEC, which has a meeting this weekend. But you are obviously the player, the national oil company of Saudi Arabia. Do you have the ability to get to 12 relatively quickly if the world needed it, if prices were to spike? As our president has referenced, OPEC needs to bring prices down. Do you have that capacity?
Well, what we always say, the maximum sustained capacity is 12 million barrels, and it is sustainable capacity. And as you know, we have the reserve, 260 billion barrels, audited reserves by third party, that is available to sustain that maximum sustained capacity. That capacity is available, some of it in days, some of it in weeks, with a maximum of 3 months to have it all available. So the capacity is available and sustainable.
How many barrels do you believe will come off from Iran?
Well, I don't want to speculate about how many barrels. Depends on the curtailment from other countries in terms of production. But what we are saying to our customer, that we have the barrels to meet any shortfalls from our customers.
We were at OPEC, and the announcement from OPEC in June was a little confusing to many, because it basically gave a proportion for what each of the OPEC members could then increase their capacity. So under the OPEC agreement, as you understand it, how much would Saudi Arabia and Saudi Aramco be allowed to increase capacity under the OPEC deal?
Whatever, I don't want to talk about OPEC and the agreements and whatever stipulated on that agreement. All what we are saying, and His Excellency the Minister of Energy, Industry and Minerals announced before, that we meet the requirement of our customers in terms of additional barrels. And so far, we have not failed in meeting the customers' demand.
Do you feel the pressure from President Trump's comments about demand, supply, and OPEC?
Well, as I said, from our side, we have to satisfy our customers in terms of the additional barrels they need to make sure stable market is maintained. Stability of the market is very important for Saudi Aramco and for the kingdom. His Excellency the Minister announced a couple of times that the stability of the market is something that is of great importance to us, and we'll continue to play our role in making sure the market is stable, additional barrels are availed, and I think the spare capacity, which is the highest in the industry, is available within the kingdom.
There have been some reports that you may be out of your best quality crude for October delivery. Some had speculated, if that is true, that it might be a pull forward of demand because of those Iranian sanctions. Are you out of October delivery?
We do have all type of crudes. Let me put it that way. The maximum portion of the crude that we have is Arab Light, which is well liked by all of our customers. But we do have the extra light, the super light, the medium, the heavy, and the light. Of course, the majority of our crude is Arab Light.
So you have that ability now?
Of course, and we do have the flexibility. The spare capacity gives us the flexibility to avail different type of crudes.
I know that you lived in Texas a long time ago, and we've been to Texas a few times. I'm sure you've been all over the world, but from the Permian perspective. Yeah. The United States, the Permian Shale revolution has been nothing short of incredible. How sustainable do you believe it is? Will our wells decline at a greater rate than we think?
Well, for the time being, we are seeing growth, and very remarkable growth in shale oil in the U.S. And I think that will continue. But eventually, with shale oil, the decline rate is much higher than conventional. In the first year, almost the decline is 60 to 70%. So it depends on how much sustainable over the long term. In terms, you need to have a lot of drilling to sustain the growth that we are seeing currently. It will be a challenge. It is a challenge now today for conventional oil when it comes to maintaining capacity for some countries because they need continuous drilling. And the decline rate, talking about 100 million barrels today, when you talk about a decline of 3 million to 3.5 million, that's a decline rate of 3 to 3.5%.
Every year?
Every year. So for shale oil, the decline is much more than that each year.
Do you think there's too much optimism around the Permian shale boom?
Well, as I said, you need to have a continuous drilling, you need to have a continuous improvement in technology, but ultimately it will decline. But for the time being, the growth is there, and we are seeing remarkable results in the growth in shale oil. And
would you invest in it?
Well, with 260 billion barrels of conventional oil, that is also at a very low cost. And some of our reserves are not developed yet because we don't need to develop it all. We do have still a lot of investment opportunity in the kingdom. But we are...
That's a gentle no.
But we are looking at investment in international gas. And that is important for us. This is the first time we're looking at international gas opportunity for investment. And we're looking at U.S. and other enclaves for investment in international gas. So gas is important for us. It will offset what we consume in the kingdom in terms of oil, and it will allow us in the future, in the long term, not only to increase the utilization of gas in the utility sector, taking it from 50 to 70%, but to also reduce the amount of liquid that we utilize in these sectors.
What's amazing about gas, and maybe you haven't gotten enough credit for your gas. You've been capturing gas for a long time. There's almost no flaring in the kingdom. There's low carbon intensity. Liquefied natural gas, we're now a net exporter in the United States. We have 3 terminals now. 5 are under construction. 6 have been approved. 6 others have been approved. And there's 11 that are currently being thought about. Do you think there's going to ultimately be a gas bust in the United States?
Well, I think the market is there. If you look at the gas by 2040, that's why we're looking at international gas, honestly. The growth in gas by 2040, you're looking at 50% growth in gas. Gas did a remarkable job in the U.S. to reduce the CO2 emissions almost by 14% over the last decades by replacing coal. So I think the market for gas is there. The growth opportunities is there. There is a huge market for gas.
Enough to sustain that kind of growth that the U.S. is planning?
Well, I think yes. If you think about demands in the future and what is happening in the rest of the world and the shift in a lot of countries from to utilize gas-fired power plants to reduce a carbon footprint, which is important. Yeah. I think there is a lot of opportunities.
There was a report in Reuters that your IPO has been permanently shelved. Was that report incorrect?
Of course it is incorrect. And His Excellency the Minister last month indicated that the government is committed to the IPO at a time of choosing when the market conditions are optimum. And the reason I say it's incorrect, because look at what the government did so far to make sure the company is ready for the IPO. We have the company is a joint stock company effective January this year, new board. We signed a new concession agreement. We changed the bylaw. We audited the reserve, oil and gas reserve by third party, which is important for listing Saudi Aramco. And at the same time, for Aramco, we started segment reporting, which is important for different listing requirements. And we had the investment relation function completely, a new admin area in the company for the listing of the company. So all the elements required, and the fiscal regime, of course, was changed in terms of taxes and all of that. All the elements that required for listing Saudi Aramco were done. So it shows you the commitment of the government for listing Saudi Aramco.
Why do you think the story was written? Why was it wrong?
Well, whatever, you can ask whoever wrote the story, but it is not correct. The commitment is still there.
How does the SABIC deal, you made a massive deal to buy Saudi Arabia Basic Industries Corporation, SABIC. How does that change the timing then of any planned IPO?
Of course, well, I have highlighted earlier that the SABIC deal will delay, definitely will have an impact on the timing of the IPO. The SABIC deal, the size of we are at the early stage, let me put it that way first, of negotiation with the Public Investment Fund. It's a major deal. We are doing the due diligence currently, and you cannot list while you are going through an acquisition of this size.
So it delays it automatically.
So this is happening automatically. It is important for us, the SABIC deal, because of our strategy. When you look at Saudi Aramco today, we are more into the upstream. We have a leading position when it comes to upstream. But when you look at the downstream, we don't have a leading position. We want to be deeper when it comes to downstream. We are in refining capacity almost 5 million today. We want to go to 8 to 10 million. Crude to chemical, we are looking at 2 million barrels over the next 10 years. And we're looking at shifting up, aspiring to shift up to 3 million barrels of our crude to chemicals, mainly because the growth potential in chemicals is almost 3% over the long term, compared to the transport sector of approximately 1.5%. So it has a strategic fit for us to look at an acquisition of this size.
So if CNBC were to run a headline that said, Aramco still plans IPO by 2020, would that be incorrect?
Well, I don't want to commit, the dates and all of that. You see, first of all...
We like dates.
I don't want to talk about it because, as I said, we are at an early stage of due diligence. Then you have to, it's a process, and then you need to do further negotiation with BIF about their major or strategic shares in SABIC, which is almost 70%. Then you need to do the antitrust, and you know how long that will take in terms of different countries that will be required, in terms of regulatory process that will be required. So I don't want to talk about dates at this stage. Ultimately, as I said, as His Excellency the Minister, this is something for the government to decide on. From our side, I just want to reiterate that the government has announced that they are committed to the IPO.
Okay.
I gave you all the indicators to show the commitment is there because of what's been done so far to prepare the company. And of course, we have went into negotiation now and discussion with BIF, Public Investment Fund, regarding their stake, as I said, in SABIC. And that definitely, you cannot list while you are going. You need to finish the whole process.
It's a very big deal.
Not only that, you need to have, if that deal go through, and we acquire the strategic stake in SABIC, you need to incorporate that in your balance sheets, and there is also a requirement for certain times before you can list. So there are regulatory requirements we need to follow fully before.
There's a lot.
Exactly.
So I want to end on that final question then, because you have the opportunity here on CNBC to speak to not only the world, but also the men and women that control the U.S. markets, Wall Street, the New York Stock Exchange. There's been some discussion that the regulatory burdens of the United States are so high that it makes listings for a company of your size to be simply much more expensive and weighty than they need to be. Are the regulatory burdens in the United States, from a listing perspective, simply too high? Would we lose our advantage for an Aramco listing?
Well, I think there is a regulatory burden in the U.S., but ultimately with regard to listing, there is no decision yet on where to list exactly. Ultimately, this is a decision that the government will take or the shareholder will take when the listing happen, in which country. As I said, as a company, we have done our assessment and we share that with our shareholder. Now, there are, as I said, pluses and minuses when you look at each market. The depth of the U.S. market in terms of liquidity is significant. There is a lot of
so is London.
Exactly, but it is much deeper when it comes of liquidity in the U.S. But legalities and regulations and all of these things need to be taken into consideration when you consider listing. All of these things will be put together and evaluated, and when the decision comes, it will be taken into consideration.
Amin Nasser, CEO and President of Saudi Aramco, thank you so much for inviting us to set. It's in your offices here in New York. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.